So hi everybody, today is May the 8th, and this is the first of our attempt at doing design review based meetings every second week. Today we have two design reviews, but before we do that, we have a special guest from the testing team, Eric Feda, who will be showing us what the testing team has been doing. And we spent the last quarter kind of aligning our end-to-end testing status. And that a lot of our tests are going to move to merge blocking in the next, hopefully the next few days. I'm hoping that you'll see and appreciate what SIG testing has been doing for us as we start going around and through the SIG and nominating people as for being build cops on a rotating schedule. So Eric, you're on. Would you like to present?
Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen here. So I'm Eric. You mostly participate with the SIG testing and contributor experience groups. And then everything I'm going to show you, mostly Prow, is on the test info repo. So you can navigate yourself there. And then if you go down to the README, it has links to some of our tools. And then quickly, I presume maybe some of you have hopefully seen all of this, but maybe not. So there's the PR dashboard, which you can click here. Then this gives you a quick little thing about showing you which PRs need your attention and not. So if this is a potential way to help you, expedite the review process. And then there's also a test grid, which will show you a bunch of different things, a bunch of different test results. One thing we're trying to work on this quarter is to give everybody give each SIG their own dashboard. And so, so like we're trying out with like a SIG CLI dashboard with the idea being that each tab in here will be highly relevant to each SIG to help them find test results that may need their attention. Something that's
we also have our own cluster federation, Eric. I don't know if you see.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then let's see here. So. Yeah, so whatever. So now and then some fun things that may not also be known is you can graph on test grid. So each row will be graphed here, and then in the options area you can filter. So if you only want to, look at replica set tests, you can do that pretty quickly by typing replica set. And so then it'll just show those tests, which are pretty nice. And then, let's say that something, so now probably the least easy to find feature is like, imagine, maybe like it was all green on A04, this commit, but then it was red starting on the 6DA. I wanted to know what PRs went in between those two. I can click and drag between the two PRs and then do search for changes, and it will throw up a GitHub search that lets me see that it looks like there are 8 commits that went in between those two things. So that can be that can be a pretty quick way to search for things. And then the real reason, so you can see here actually the summary is really nice because rather than having to scan through each and every tab, you can just go to the summary page, and this is showing that it looks like the 1.6 tests are having trouble. Like these 3 rows are consistently failing, right? So we saw here what it looked like something weird happened at 8 a.m. Not too concerned about that because probably the next time it's going to go away. But these guys, it looks like we're consistently having this problem starting the cluster. So that sort of can help us focus on what exactly we need to look at. And then another nice thing about test grid is that if you go to the test grid config, All of these dashboards are, everything about the configuration is open source. So anybody who wants to add their own results, like Justin Santa Barbara, for example, is running his own results. And so if you are not Google, but want to have your results be part of TestGrid, it's easy to do that. And then if you are wanting to sort of, change how we run tests, that's just a PR away. And then, so we have test groups which sort of say they specify that like these Stackdriver tests are all going to be stuck inside this GCS prefix. And then once you have a bunch of test groups, you can build them up into a dashboard. What was it, Cluster Federation? Yeah, so you can see here that the Cluster Federation dashboard is composed of these dashboard tabs. And then if you look at the CLI, so the difference between a test group is essentially a collection of tests, and then you can specify some additional filtering. So like for the CLI, we're taking the existing test results, but then filtering down to the kube control client tests. Yeah, then you can also add a description, which will then, which isn't being used elsewhere yet, but so for example, that is what shows up on the CLI dashboard. Each tab is then going to have a description on the top saying exactly what each tab means. So that is TestGrid. And then Prow is the other tool that we are using for sort of as our replacement for Jenkins. And it has two primary purposes in life. The first is to receive GitHub events, such as anytime someone adds a label or creates an issue or pushes a commit or adds a comment, GitHub sends us a notification about that happening. And then we have a bunch of plugins written that will respond to those events, either by the bot leaving a comment or by adding a label or removing a label, and most typically by triggering testing. And then the way testing works is we start a container in a Kubernetes cluster. We essentially schedule a Kubernetes pod and then wait for it to complete. And then and so then that gets shoved into the pull request. So pull requests, the little green checkboxes or red X's in the pull request. And so if you go to prow.k8s.io, right now it'll show you all the stuff that's happening. Then you can filter the I just want to look at the test infra changes, or I only want to look at pull requests that are in whatever. I only want to look at my pull requests, or I only want to look at jobs that are running the Federation test results, or I only want to look at successful Federation tests. So you can do all that filtering. Now this isn't meant, like TestGrid shows a week of data. This is a little bit quicker, which is nice, but it's not really. It's not meant for historical. It's more meant for current. I want to see what's happening now. And yeah, so one potential thing, that's potentially interesting is the fact that we are intending this week to start blocking on Federation pre-submits. So in order to merge your PR, it will need to pass Federation tests. And so we're actually, and so likewise, this is, the configuration for this is open source. So if you go into testin for Prow, then there's this config thing, which sort of specifies the jobs that are run in each repo. So you can see that pull Kubernetes Bazel is configured to always run. There are some others, such as the GKE tests. Like if you want to request the GKE tests, you can leave this comment on your PR and it'll start them, but we don't always run them anymore since people cannot always fix them by making a PR. The Federation tests are interesting because they are sort of running in stealth mode in order to help us debugging. we always run them, but we also skip the report, which means that we won't actually add the check mark or try and notify people that they need to rerun them. And that's the thing we're going to be changing this week. And then some other cool things is you can actually get logs for the results as they're happening. So for example, this PR, I guess, what looks like they just pushed a change, or no, looks like Aaron just said this was okay to test 28 minutes ago. And this little hamburger icon right here means that the orange guy means that the test is running or hasn't finished yet. And the hamburger means that the tests, they'll show you the test logs. And so you can see here that I guess it's building. And if you refresh, now there's more data. So you can get the output as it's happening, which is pretty nice because that has not historically been something that is easy for everybody to do. And then the other cool thing is this guy here is the command. Now this is sort of, if you want to, typically for PRs, right, you just leave a comment and on the PR and then it'll re-trigger testing. But if you look at the like the Kubernetes Anywhere pull request, you can see that this is just a regular pod. So here's the pod spec for this, and yeah. So then if you want to rerun the thing, you essentially the way this works is you just create that pod. And then Prow has a nifty little feature where if you ask it the, if you click the rerun command, it'll give you a URL, which when you load it, actually gives you the YAML necessary to schedule the job. And so the Federation tests right now are actually running in the legacy Jenkins mode. And so we have a special temporary version of pods that will essentially, when you start the pod, what it'll actually do rather than running any testing is it will make a request to Jenkins to start that testing, wait for it to finish, and then report back on the results. But part of the thing that we're doing this quarter is migrating most of our testing to running directly on Prow, or running directly on Kubernetes instead of inside of Jenkins. And I guess that is it. Unless, yeah, so those are the main things I wanted to show you. And we're pretty active on, the SIG testing and channel on Slack. So if you want to talk to us, please do so either by coming over to the Slack channel or sending an email to our Google group. And yeah, thanks for letting me present, and I don't know how much time we want. I can answer questions or happy to, yep.
Yeah, just a quick question, that kubectl apply command, what context do you have to be in for it to work?
You need access to the Prow cluster that this runs in, which is not accessible to everybody. Okay. We're eventually hoping to maybe make this like a button on Kubernetes. Like when you're looking at your test results that failed, you can just click like a rerun this job button. That's sort of new, so it hasn't been fully fleshed out, but yeah. Okay,
cool. And I know Madhu's here, and for the benefit of the SIG, just because we've been talking about it for a bit now, what hurdles are left for us to enable the merge blocking?
Madhu was here.
So we actually had the PR. So I can answer that. He had a PR out on Friday. And we were planning to do that. We mostly just we didn't want to do it on Friday because, well, we actually tried Saturday morning, but then I messed something up. And so we just decided that it'd be better to revert and wait till Monday when everyone's, fresh and paying attention. I did half of it. And so I just caused chaos.
That's not, yeah.
Yeah. We are very close.
Okay. Madhu, do you want to go over like what, since you've been the primary kind of build cop, you have a set of tools. I don't know if they're in a demoable state, but whatever that you can tell the SIG that you do to monitor testing, because we have a kind of specialized environment that a lot of other SIGs don't have to deal with.
Right. So most of the tools I use are pretty much the things that Eric already showed. I use I keep my test grid open all the time and look at it like once every 30 minutes or an hour. So as far as monitoring is concerned, test grid and pro are the only things that I use. So if anybody is signing up for build cop rotation for monitoring, that's all you need. You don't need any special permissions. There is one problem that we have with our tests though. When the tests fail, we leak a lot of resources. I think that's true about Kubernetes tests as well, but in our case, it has been especially true and painful. And because some of these resources that we leak have really low quota caps, it's painful because we stall the queue or we stall our tests when we run out of quota, or the tests start failing when we run out of quota. So I have this small little tool which I've written to clean up all the obsolete or stale resources in our project. Test infra people, Saint Lou from SIG testing also has pretty much the same tool, which he calls as Kubernetes Janitor. But Kubernetes Janitor is like a big hammer, but the tool that I have is more targeted. It knows federation-specific resources, and it can go and clean those resources. We have been talking about integrating my tool, which I call as FetID, with Kubernetes Janitor. Hasn't happened yet, so you still need to run it as a command line tool. I'll just show you how to run it. It's really simple. I'm on the right side, I have my shell. I'm in the directory. It's a very simple tool. And if you build, the output goes to the output directory. And once we have that, there's also a README for people who are interested. It's in a separate repository right now, but I'm considering where to put this. But anyway, all you need to do after building the source is run the command. That's it. And I need the project name and the DNS zone name. This is the project name and the DNS zone name, and that's it. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what's happening here.
DNS zone, not DNS zone name.
I see. Thank you. All right, that's it. It goes and cleans resources. And this is the tool that I use. That's it.
Okay. I think one thing you should mention that's important is the logic that you have in here makes it such that it's always safe to run the tool, despite the fact that there are ongoing tests that are potentially running at the same time. That's what makes it different. Right. So this should be part of the grab bag of tools for whoever's on build comp rotation. The side effect, if you're on rotation for just a week or two, you may never have to run it. Eventually, what catches up with us is if there's too many failing tests that leak resources, then it turns into a cascading set of failures, and then you'll see Federation turn red for absolutely everybody. So know that this is what you need to use as a backup strategy.
Would it make sense to, if it's safe to run, would it make sense to just run this at the end of every suite?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
I don't know. I think part of it is we kind of want to know also whether we're leaking resources in some.
Also wanted to say the same thing, that we want to keep it for a few runs to be able to debug, and like later on, once we debug, we can run it.
Got it. Okay.
I know Madhu and I discussed something about like keeping resources for 24 hours or something. I don't know if this tool or like by default only deletes resources that are more than 24 hours old. Maybe then we can run it, because we'll still have other resources which are like less than 24 hours old. Madhu, can you clarify?
Right now, the time is set to 8 hours, but I don't see why we can't customize that.
Okay. So yeah, we can run it regularly where it deletes like maybe at least more than a week old, and we keep whatever some X days for debugging.
Does the tool know what resources are being deleted, or is it sending back commands and not getting status data? Because if it knows what's being deleted, you could also dump that to a log file. I don't know if that's useful. Then you'd have at least a list of what you're deleting.
Sorry, I did not understand. What was the question?
Could the tool print out what it's deleting?
It doesn't print out, but it knows.
Okay, so you could dump that to a file too, and then each time it runs, you have an idea of what was being deleted, and you could save that history. So you wouldn't have access to the objects themselves in Google Cloud, but you would know that they were deleted, and you could see what was deleted if something looked like it was leaking.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to do that, you just have to. I mean, you have to first list all of them and fetch the entire object for each of those resources, and then delete them. Just having the names is not that useful, I guess. You need the object contents.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, running it regularly for at least a week old resources seems reasonable.
Most of these names are generated, right? Like if you look at the forwarding rules names, they usually don't make sense by the name itself. The description in there is what makes sense.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
All right, that's it.
Also, I wanted to clarify, to running this tool, we need access to the project. And so is it fine to add whoever is going to be on build corp rotation? Is it fine to add them to give them access to this project? Or maybe we start with like only a few people having access and others can contact them to run this tool? Or how do we want to do it?
I mean, I don't know. I think we should take that up separately in a meeting outside this meeting with people who actually prefer to sign up to build corp rotation. I'm not entirely sure if we should discuss that.
Would it be bad to run it as like on a cron job or something within I don't know whose whose identity, but whoever has access to the project?
That is not a problem. Eric already said you could run periodic jobs in Pro the same way we run all our other jobs. So you could just either integrate this tool with the current janitor, and janitor runs once every hour, I think, or we could have our own Pro config for this tool that runs every hour or every 8 hours or every 24 hours, whatever.
Okay. I'd say let's just do that for the purpose of lower barrier of entry for new build corp people to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay. Cool. Any questions?
Great. So the main motive to show all these tools was to ensure everyone understands that how to debug, and all these tools are available so that people outside, not just Googlers, also have access to the logs, and they can join the build corp rotation and use these tools when they are on the rotation. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So the next step is to set up the rotation.
I also want to mention that Eric has been a great help to our SIG. It goes unnoticed because most of the talking, but he has done a lot of work to help us enable Federation pre-submit. So I want to thank him.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Eric.
Great. In time. So our next on the agenda is to discuss federated jobs. And I see Janhui is on the call. I do see a lot of open comments even from November, and there's no reply. Yeah, Janhui, do you want to talk about this?
If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Channel, we can hear you. Hey, Johnny. Hey, Johnny, are you there? We see you unmuted, but we.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next one, and then maybe he'll.
Yeah. Let's do the next one then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me. I'll ping him in the meanwhile. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, he's there now, Johnny.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Well,
So Johnny, do you want to talk about what feedback you've got? What are the open comments you are trying to resolve? Or
okay. I think most of the comments have been resolved. And actually, going to add some cases which are the in red.
Okay. So if the comments are resolved, can you actually just resolve them in the doc? Because it's hard for me, like looking at this, I see a long string of comments.
Yeah.
And to read them, it's very hard to know whether these comments have been integrated into the text or whether they are like still outstanding.
Okay, I see. So I just click the resolve button, right?
Yeah.
Well, on the resolved ones. Right?
Yeah, on the resolved ones.
yeah.
Okay.
Like I do see there are some open comments as well where we need more details or they need to be fleshed out further. So I don't know if you are still working on these or like what's the status?
Yeah, the current status is that I've implemented the most part of this controller, except that about how to rebalance the jobs, which we plan to implement it in a separate PR. There's a open issue for that.
So we should reflect that in the comments itself in the document, Johnny. I'll work with you on that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Because I guess it's a little odd looking at this design, seeing things that are like that comment from Quinton. I was like, yes, we need to do this.
Yeah. No, I think definitely we'll do that. Yeah. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Anything
much.
else? I think you folks might have gone through the document. Anything else like a major thing that kind of stands out as far as the design is concerned?
By the way, I read the doc over the weekend. I think a bunch of comments that were resolved has been marked as resolved already. If you click on the comments button at the top, you'll see them. My understanding was that the comments that were on the doc were unresolved ones or ones that were not important for the initial implementation, depending on the comments. So that's that. And then I had a specific question about rebalancing. Quinton had this comment somewhere in the rebalancing section saying one way to do rebalancing was to schedule one pod at a time. I want to make sure I want to understand if that's what you guys are doing because I have some concerns about it.
Well, actually, we are still designing the rebalancing strategy, which there is a issue number 45187. I think maybe we can move there to discuss about.
Are we planning to do that as part of 1.7, the rebalancing, or the later?
It depends.
PR is fine, but because we have this design doc, I would really love to have all of them in one place so that in the future we could point people to it and have some discussion here as well, I guess, or maybe have the PR linked here and point people there. I don't know. because this is a nice write-up about what's going on in the federated job controller. Why not have it in one place in a more natural language form than in the PR form on GitHub?
Okay, I'm linking that PR here. After this has been resolved, I will update this document.
Okay.
Okay. So looks like there is no open comment.
Yeah, I think so. The couple of guys have reviewed that actually. Irfan reviewed it too, and I think Quinton has done a review as well. So yeah, so we will make sure. I think Janu will make sure that he does that. Update the resolves and everything in the document.
Did we also present this in SIG apps?
We sent out. I think we sent out emails. We didn't present it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I mean, if we are able to resolve the comments just here itself, then if there were like major comments, then yes, we'll need to go to the SIG. But if all of them have been resolved,
So there were initial, I think, comment, basic comment from Eric. I think a while long, 6 months ago. But afterward, we didn't hear anything from anybody from that SIG. But yeah, we will do that. We will put those things in this document and send it out, the revised version.
Okay. Awesome. Does anyone want to add something here, or we can move on to the next one?
If we have time, I'd like to know what's the state of the PR and its ability. Is it mergeable?
It should be mergeable, but this morning I find that the upstream has changed. I will resolve those conflicts, and then it should be able to merge. And I will focus on the rebalancing stuff.
Okay, and there's end-to-end tests in that?
Yes.
Okay, maybe again, opening up the discussion in terms of, seems the annotations follow the same format as what's been suggested in federated replica set. Are we going to try to formalize on an abstraction that works in replica set and in jobs, or are we just going to copy paste the annotations?
Wasn't there already project work in flight to normalize federated replica sets and deployments to have one set of annotations?
Yeah, I think I did see a PR from Irfan, I think.
Yes, and that sort of has been reviewed, and
so what it does is, so just to add more color, what Irfan's PR does is, right now we have these specific annotations where it says like replica set preferences and deployment preferences. He renames them to, I forgot what the new name is, but it's a generic name which all of these controllers can use.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that's going to go out, then I think we should try to make sure that jobs in 1.7 uses those, or else we're going to end up having to support 2 types of annotations over 2 releases.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question about unifying this preferences annotation for jobs. I forgot to ask it when we were talking about jobs proposal. I think the preferences as it is today in replica sets and deployments are quite incompatible with jobs. How do you plan to unify? The reason why I'm saying is the replica set preferences today has min, max, and weight, assuming that we only have one field to balance, one field to handle here, which is the replicas field in replica sets and deployments, whereas jobs has 2 different fields to handle pretty much the same thing. One is completions and the other one is parallelism. How do you plan to unify those preferences with jobs?
Well, actually, only the Okay, let me explain. Actually, currently the job controller called the planner twice. Once it's for to use the paradigm, to decide how many how many pods are run concurrently on each cluster. Then it use the same weight
Okay.
for the completion. So
Weight part is fine, but what happens if a user sets min and max or min or max?
min and max only affects the parallelism.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. If you guys are going to document that, I think it's pretty incompatible. I think it should be called like min completions, max completions, or something specific to jobs. But that's fine, I guess, as a first step.
Okay, I understand what was your concern. I would try to describe it in this document and also this open PR, open issue.
Okay.
On rebalance. Yeah.
Also, this seems to be a resource where a cluster selector would come in handy.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know if you want to call that out in the design, but it's one of those things where if you rebase the design, rebase the implementation on top of the sync controller where we plan to introduce cluster selector, you kind of get that feature in.
Yeah, actually, I don't see any details regarding that, but we should base it over sync controller, and the work that Jonathan is doing to move replica set controller to sync controller should help here as well.
Yeah, and that should hopefully be, hopefully the work is in progress right now. Hopefully by the end of today, it will be quite ready for early out and ready for at least some initial review. And once that's done, hopefully the work for job controllers should be a lot more straightforward. I know that Maru also has a change in flight that should make this even better and simpler and cleaner factored. So hopefully that all can be merged this week. That would be my goal for the replica sets.
So, but then should this be blocked on that, or should we let this be merged and then similar to the work we're doing with replica set, we do the same work here where we like piecemeal move some logic to sync controller?
I don't really have a strong opinion. I mean, I think in a perfect world, yeah, it should just use the sync controller right away rather than having a bunch of code go in and then be refactored. But we don't live in a perfect world, and the PR has been outstanding long enough that, I mean, if there are other things blocking it and the replica set sync controller work goes in soon enough and this can be converted, then it would be good. But I don't necessarily, I mean, I guess the question is, would we be okay with this not being a sync controller in the 1.7 release?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, it has to be a sync controller, then it should be a sync controller now, because we don't want to. And if the answer is that's okay, then putting it in now is.
Yeah, so I think the answer seems to be if replica set controller changes go in, and by the time replica set controller is already using sync controller, then we should move job controller to use that as well. But we won't block it if it's ready to go in before that.
I kind of think that it should just go in. It kind of just lays the groundwork for a refactor. And then the focus can be on like the refactor versus all new work. I don't know, especially if people have looked at the code already.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's quite unfair to say if this goes before the refactor, it's fine.
Sorry, Madhu, you cut out.
I think we got the point,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess the question is, as a SIG, are we okay with that going in 1.7 and not being a sync controller? If that's acceptable, then if that's unacceptable, then I would be concerned. If that's okay, then I think it should just go in.
Yeah, Yeah. So I guess we are saying it is okay.
Okay.
And Jianhui, are you available to once merge, revisit the code and re-implement it over sync?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he will. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
And just a rough question in terms of EDE tests, how many tests are we talking about?
I don't remember actually. It's been a while.
Okay. There are some tests.
Okay.
I
Main
think
purpose is
Yeah, it's
just-
not. It's just create and delete actually because it currently doesn't support rebalancing.
okay. All right, if it's just CRUD, then that's probably one of those that's eligible for moving to integration eventually, but
Yeah, these ED tests are same as what we have for other resources.
yes. No, my main point was just making sure we don't increase the length of EDE tests too much. But if it's just the regular CRUD, it's fine. For the record, I think we should revisit all the variants of the 4 variants of CRUD that just change the value of orphan. I think it's not valuable at all in ED, and it's getting covered in integration.
At least if the type is, if it has integration tests.
Yes.
Sorry, not so much that. I mean, we had this discussion before. I agree that E2E for any type that's based on the sync controller isn't really necessary since that pathway is tested. But if a type isn't based on the sync controller, then we probably want to maintain it for now. E2E, I mean.
Yes.
Right. Which says like.
In addition to CRUD tests, I guess this will have basic job functionality tests, even excluding rebalancing. That is to check if the jobs were actually complete in the underlying clusters and if the parallelism count was propagated and all such things. Jianhui?
Yes, currently it's included.
What's that? Currently what?
Currently included what you said. Verified the job has been created in the IE cluster and the status propagation.
Okay.
Actually, I don't see any parallelism tests that Madhu said.
I mean, what I'm asking for is basic functionality tests to ensure that the jobs functionality actually works across clusters.
Yeah. I have those tests.
Okay, we can take this outside this meeting. We don't have to
Yeah.
go on that.
Okay.
Is there anything else, or can we move on to the
Yeah, the
next
next one.
review?
Okay. So just kind of wrap it up. So we'll update the document with all the resolves, all the issues, and then all the tests. Make sure that whatever Madhu is talking about, we'll sort that out. I think we're good to go then in that case.
Yep, it sounds like, yeah, we can submit it when it's mergeable and once the comments are resolved on the doc.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll take the notes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next is the auth requirements for Federation control plane. So from the list of open comments, I see like there are 2 set of comments. One is the value of like why are we doing this, and one is related to the implementation details. And I see there was another issue in Kubernetes itself where there was a proposal to do this like track created by user, and the current proposal was only to track created by user, but like the comments there was to track updated by user as well. So there is some implementation discussion in Kubernetes as well, which we could reuse. But the main comments I got from SIG were and this is the comment, this is the Kubernetes proposal, which we can sort of piggyback on.
I think it's worth, I mean, if you read that, my sort of takeaway was that they don't actually want to do it. If you scroll down and read like David Eade's most recent comment, maybe in December,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure we can use this as an indication that we should be doing anything similar because they seem to have rejected it, basically, at least for now.
Yeah. So yeah, that's true. And another thing they were waiting on was like getting more use cases of where this would be useful. And so I just added that we want to use it in Federation as well. And like we can carry forward the discussion if there are multiple use cases. Then maybe this particular implementation is not a good one, but there are other use cases outside Federation which want to track same created by user as well.
So when we were discussing this, I'm kind of just trying to remember the context of the discussion, but I think we did talk about the idea of using namespaces as kind of like a way of kind of the mechanism for protecting clusters. And I guess I'm kind of like, this proposal doesn't really touch on that.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, is that an oversight or is that just not something that you think is viable in the near term?
No, so this proposal is different, which is regarding user identity propagation. And there was a separate discussion for giving like Federation access to specific namespaces as well. And
But I'm not, I think that there's kind of like overlap in that, because if I'm providing, I guess for me, like there's identity in the context of the Federation control plane, and there's identity in the context of the member clusters, and there has to be some sort of way of reconciling that. And to me, like, because the way that you protect resources, at least when you're not talking about specific resources, you give access to resources at the namespace level. And I'm kind of thinking like, well, wouldn't it make sense to kind of have that be true in both the Federation control plane and member clusters, rather than worrying about impersonation and per object control? You could say this class of users has access to this set of namespaces and not this set of namespaces, for example. So
yeah,
whether you're segment it by department or team or something like that. But to me, that seems like a more concrete use case than I just want to control things at a very granular level without really specifying why and then how it would be used.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you said. But before I add more details, I wanted to make sure, have you looked at this issue and do you think this captures what you are trying to say? Like, want to make sure that this is the issue you're talking about.
I think so, yeah. Can you scroll down just a little bit? Did Jordan comment on this?
Yeah.
I mean, so he didn't say if he's positive or negative, it was more of an implementation comment.
I think there was another issue that was related where we were talking specifically about what it would take to monitor resources in a cluster, and it was like per namespace.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think that those two issues are capturing some of the implementation details we'd have to consider.
Yeah. So, but these are more namespace scope where if Federation gets access to,
right.
Like the access control is more namespace scope, that it can get access to the whole namespace or not, like, and get access to subset of namespaces.
Right.
And I do see. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll stop.
No, so I wanted to just say that I definitely see value in this, and I was discussing this with Christian as well. And we can discuss this as well, but the other proposal, I've kept these two as two different proposals which we can go forward with. And I do have more details and like a more detailed design doc for the first one. For the second one, I just filed this issue to discuss more and like get comments from SIGOR, and I haven't really got any concrete like yes or no from them. Or maybe you can add your +1 and I filed this issue to get more feedback of what people think, and I don't have enough feedback yet. But to me, it does seem like a relevant value add. Like
I think this proposal is, I think it's just a more realistic way, at least right now, the way that Kubernetes auth works, like a way to provide a degree of security isolation across a federation, and not worry about the vagaries of like who changed what when, which is not something that Kubernetes does a very good job of, in my opinion. So.
Yes. So, but there are some drawbacks with this proposal as well. Like, how do we create namespaces? How do we create federated namespace? This assumes that like there are some existing namespaces and Federation gets access to those. And in this case, Federation would not get access to create namespaces because then like it gets access to all more namespaces as well. So this is more restrictive. And if we want to allow Federation to create namespaces, then this won't work.
Right. That's definitely a question for SIG auth. I mean, when I was thinking about like through how this kind of thing would work, I think the only positive though is at least there would be kind of partitioning so that maybe Federation would have like an admin level access, but all it would do with that admin level access would be to create and set permissions for namespaces. And then propagation to namespaces that it created, that would be using a different like restricted set of permissions. So I don't know, like I said, I think SIG auth definitely would have to provide feedback on that, but I think it definitely has advantages over just providing like a single admin level user and they could do anything, because that kind of opens it up to all kinds of things. But one more thing before I finish, when I was thinking about like protecting like member clusters and potentially having like differential access, it occurred to me that this is tied into like your work Federation control plane being able to access member clusters, like view the contents of it and actually deliver that to the user. Mm-hmm. And not that I necessarily want to open the discussion, but just that those seem really closely related. If we start protecting or having differential access to the underlying clusters, then we'll have to reflect that in when users try to access those resources through the Federation control plane.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with the second part. And for the first part, I would say, yes, we need feedback from SIG auth, but we need to put our requirements as Federation SIG as well. If we go with this proposal, like, I don't think we should give Federation access to create namespaces as well, because then it's like root on the underlying clusters. It can create namespaces, it can create service accounts for those namespaces and then use them. And then we are not really like restricting Federation to some specific namespaces. So if we do this, I see this as a separate mode in which like admins want to set, they already have namespaces set up in different clusters and they want to use Federation to get access to just those specific namespaces, and they'll never create federated namespaces via Federation control plane. I mean,
it could be that it's a completely separate server that handles the provisioning of permissions and namespaces, and I mean, it's more like if we express that we have that need, then how we implement it. I think there's ways to do it that are better than others. Yeah, but I just wanted to clarify that I don't think in this mode we'll give Federation access to create namespaces. Yeah, there can be some tools outside, and there are some outstanding proposals to sync like LDAP with namespace systems. So that is one way of creating namespace automatically. And there are other proposals as well. And yeah, there are these outside tools which we can use to create namespaces, but Federation won't get access to create namespaces. Okay.
Ever or to some specific set of users?
In this mode, where it's using namespace scoped service accounts, like it gets access to some set of namespaces and there's a service account associated with each namespace. And if Federation wants to read or create resources in that namespace, it uses the service account associated with that namespace. So each time if Federation needs access to a new namespace, the admin explicitly need to give it that namespace and a service account associated with that namespace. Federation itself cannot create a new namespace and a new service account.
Okay, I need to think about this. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, this is right. Like there are pros and cons to this proposal as well. And I'm looking for more feedback on this.
I think that if a namespace approach was pursued, we probably need to, I mean, I guess there's nothing stopping adding security protection to the Federation control plane so that specific users could only, create resources in specific namespaces. That's possible, right? Just using standard Kubernetes primitives.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't support RBAC yet in Federation, but you can use ABAC and other existing authorization modes to do that. Yes.
Okay. And I guess I don't know, there's been, I know that Clayton actually was thinking about how to propagate security policy for OpenShift, and I haven't really talked to him in detail about it, but maybe that would be something we'd want to consider as well. I don't know how it ties into like how namespace creation security would work, but like if you were to create namespaces in the Federation control plane with specific properties, security-wise, maybe you could actually propagate that as part of it. I don't know. As part of Federation, I mean, not just the objects, but actually the security around those objects. Otherwise, how does it work? You have them secure in the Federation control plane, but then you move them over and they're not secure. That doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. So to clarify, do you mean like RBAC rules when you say security?
I guess so. To be honest, I kind of understand a little bit about RBAC. I understand less about ABAC.
Yeah. So when we talk about security related to namespace, there are multiple things. There's like RBAC, there's resource quota, there's like pod security policies. So these are resources which we don't yet support in Federation. We do want to support all of them. So right now we don't have this, and whenever we do support, we will definitely like send them across to or fan them out to the underlying clusters as well. So we won't restrict them only to Federation. Like if you create a RBAC route, we send them to underlying clusters as well. If you create a resource quota in a namespace, when that namespace is propagated, we'll propagate the resource quota policies as well.
So I guess I just wanted to point out that when we get to the point, I mean, to me, it's kind of, it's exciting in a way because it means we kind of become like an actually secure system. And there's kind of like a degree of similarity between how the Federation control plane works and how the member clusters will operate. But it does add a lot of complexity that we're going to have to consider for sure.
Yes. Yes. So actually, I'd like to come back to the.
But I was going to add, in general, feedback I see from SIG seems to mainly be around whether it's creation of namespace, if we're namespace scoped, or synchronizing policy. There's some discomfort associated to having Federation control plane own all of those aspects of identity. So like we were talking about it earlier, and we'd say it'd be nice if there'd be this little server that syncs namespace scope, and it seems like the answer for anything related to policy is also it'd be nice to have this little other utility. And yeah, I understand how the principle of security of containing, creating small programs that don't go beyond the scope of what they're intended makes them more auditable. But that also makes Federation, much more difficult to use. It seems like we're just not going down a path where we're trying to address these problems head on, and nobody from SIGOP is kind of helping us do that. So yeah, I throw the ball back in your court, and Nikhil, in the sense where we have to send a stronger message of these are our requirements, because I feel like we're never going to get pointed into a specific direction. It's going to be hard to converge.
Yeah.
I think that's true to some degree, but I mean, both of David and Jordan, work at Red Hat on OpenShift, and OpenShift has a certain way of doing security, which is kind of consistent with like the namespace-based approach that I've been talking about.
Okay.
I'm not really sure why they weren't promoting that initially. Maybe it just, I don't know, it didn't occur to them because it wasn't directly proposed. But I think like that approach has been like tried and tested. Customers are using it, and I would be surprised if they would say that was a bad idea.
Right.
Where it's something that they haven't really thought about and isn't really being used anywhere, then they're kind of, I can imagine why they would be wishy-washy, because they're just they're trying to anticipate what you're trying to do, and they don't necessarily have a strong sort of experiential base to make judgments on it. So
should we like invite them to the SIG? I mean, if you think they'd be comfortable giving us examples, real world examples about, how customers, I guess you guys deal with on-prem, right? So if they have some sort of LDAP deployment and how that gets synced to a particular namespace and how people are happy using it, that can serve as a good example for the SIG, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I'm not entirely sure why they haven't just been more prescriptive based on what they kind of already know, but I definitely think that extrapolating like what has been shown to work for OpenShift to like a federation, like that would seem like an obvious thing to do, and they would be the best people to make suggestions in that regard. So yeah, if we could convince them to come and have a discussion about it, that would be great, I think. But I mean, Nikhil, you actually went to SIG off and
Yeah.
proposed this, so I'm not sure what was preventing them from providing that feedback there.
I think, well, I wasn't there, but I listened to the recording afterwards, and it was more of a addressing concerns they had on your proposal. It wasn't, you know, you didn't have an opportunity to turn the tables.
Yeah, and that was more focused on the user impersonation proposal. We didn't discuss like, if not this, then what, or like what Christian is saying, what other things could work. But you can either invite them, or we can go back and have that discussion in the SIG-off meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like a good idea.
So, but for now, I've kept like both of them as two different proposals, and I see value in both of them, having namespace scoped service accounts and Federation getting access to specific namespaces, or Federation just using user identity and admins just manage which users get access to what resources or namespaces, and Federation explicitly doesn't need any permission. It just gets whatever the user has access to.
It's impersonation.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both. Sorry, go ahead. I mean, I think they're both kind of trying to solve similar problems. The impersonation thing, I don't know. I mean, it calls into question how people are going to be managing the member clusters, like whether they're going to have some sort of mechanism to propagate common policy to all the different clusters, or there's a tool that will manage a set of clusters together. But it's kind of like, isn't that what Federation is supposed to do? So I mean, even though it's like we get it for free, it's not really for free, because it means that the administrators have to kind of synchronize the access control across all the clusters. And if Federation was kind of, you know, if the privilege mechanism we were talking about for like creating namespaces and providing, or applying policy to them, maybe that sort of mechanism would be similarly required to propagate policy for individual users to support the impersonation method. I don't know if it's simpler. It kind of like it just moves. It's like a shell game. It just moves things around.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if we got any feedback from any potential users about how they'd want to manage security, or is just security is not something anybody has really been worrying about thus far?
Well, I don't know. In the context of Federation, I haven't had any discussion about anything related to identity with. I think people are still kind of running demos is the issue.
Yeah,
So you're still talking to single users and single administrators, prod dev teams. They haven't been that forthcoming. They kind of expect us to solve it, is my impression. But
I mean, I'm not the most up to speed, but my impression is that like OpenShift users are not going to use this unsecured. They have an expectation of, the bar is pretty high as far as security for OpenShift in the single cluster, and I don't think there's going to be any attempt to relax that for Federation. So
do you, as like OpenShift representative, have any requirements for Federation? Like, this is why the current model doesn't work, and like this is what I want to be fixed before we use Federation on OpenShift, and maybe like just this namespace scope proposal is enough for user impersonation, or like just give us a set of requirements and then maybe we can discuss the solutions as well. Like, will this work or this work, and that can guide us.
So I have a meeting this week with the PM responsible for Federation, and hopefully he can give me some feedback. My sort of initial take is that probably Federation without our back is not something that any OpenShift customer would want to use in production, because they expect to be able to use that on their individual clusters.
Mhm.
So Federation being supported is probably like bullet point 1. And then potentially, like I said, I probably need to actually follow up with Clayton on this. Propagation of policy may be a concern. So that rather than having to maintain policy across all the individual clusters, you would define it at the federation level in a way that was secure because it was using RBAC. I mean, I think once you start using RBAC to protect things, then it becomes a lot more acceptable to have controllers that do privileged things, because their privilege will be like limited. You have this daemon or controller that only does this, and it has privileges to do this super privileged thing, but it only does this narrow subset. It doesn't have full access to do everything. And maybe the danger in the current implementation is it's like all or nothing. And so from that perspective, I mean, like I said, I'll definitely follow up and try to clarify some of this and be able to bring back more concrete details. But I really suspect that RBAC is going to be a hard requirement in being able to selectively lock down what the Federation control plane does and what users can do in the Federation control plane. Yeah, and how those changes are propagated to secret clusters. So to me, it's like, this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Like, we want to be able to have security at, in some, relatively straightforward way. And it just becomes like everything in security, a big, huge, yeah.
So you talked about two things, RBAC and policy. So I wanted to clarify, what all do you include in policy?
I guess like policy could be things like quota and other like kind of restrictive things, but it could also like just be RBAC, where like you can do this, you can't do that. I'm not.
Authorization.
Yeah, exactly. So probably authorization and policy, and I shouldn't try to conflate the two.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, realistically, the complexity of this suggests, like, this isn't targeted for a 1.7, is it? I would expect
at least.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, at least the impersonation part, based on the feedback I've got. Yeah, the user impersonation part, no, and especially and the same for namespace code. We still need to.
We need to design before
design, yeah.
we implement, and the timeline seems pretty short.
Yep.
Okay. So I mean, I'll try to gather some feedback. I think that in addition, getting SIG Auth involved in actually helping to design a mechanism, or at least sort of consider it from a first principles point of view, that would maybe helpful. And there have been complaints, in past discussions that, like, you've gone to them and they're like, do this, and you try to propose something and they say, oh, no, we didn't mean that, or that's not a good idea. If they're involved, at the outset and designing it from like what auth is kind of the state of auth today in Kubernetes and where it's going, and informed by what OpenShift does, maybe we can have like a better starting point and try to bring in all of the, all the investigation that's been done in a way that's actually going to be implementable maybe in 1.8.
Yeah, but still, I also wanted to discuss some of the like open issues or feedback that I got, and maybe if other people have other ideas for impersonation. That I agree with the feedback that I got. Like, impersonation is too much of a powerful federation, and there are ways to mitigate it. Like, one idea we discussed was we can implement sort of intersecting impersonation, where right now if federation gets access to impersonate a user, like if federation gets access to impersonate Jonathan, federation gets access to whatever Jonathan has access to. So in this case, in fact, in some cases, federation can get more access than it requires. Like, if someone wants to use federation only for deployments, but Jonathan has access to deployment secrets, config maps, everything, federation gets more access than it requires. So the way intersecting impersonation would work is, if federation can impersonate Jonathan, it can do whatever federation can do and Jonathan can do, like the intersection of both those powers. So in that case, it won't be as powerful as like right now the current impersonation implementation is. Yeah.
I guess I was kind of thinking about how impersonation would relate to the namespace thing, and like rather than having a user identity that was tied directly to the user, it would be more like this resource is in namespace foo. Namespace foo is, we're going to use this service account to interact with the member clusters, and so it's kind of like, it seems like it converges at some point. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the user level to be useful, but like being able to impersonate using, a specific service account for a given cluster, for a given namespace, that could be useful.
Yeah, so you're still going back to the namespace scope then. If you do namespace scope, you're saying like we won't need per user identity and just namespace.
Per namespace, per cluster. It could be, people could choose how they do it, but at least that level of granularity would be possible so that, access in one namespace wouldn't translate into access to any other namespace. It wouldn't be like you get this account, you can do anything, you'd be very restricted in member clusters.
Yeah, and even with namespace, there are actually two sort of subdivisions we can make using a single identity, which has access to subset of namespaces, or an identity, a different identity for each namespace.
Right.
So yeah, so do you have a preference for that as well, or like having a single service account, but that service account getting access to only a subset of namespaces? Is that enough, or you want for namespace service account?
I'm not sure that it really matters. It's the kind of thing that you could potentially have it per namespace, or you could just have a bunch of namespaces using the same account, but like it's kind of an implementation detail you can work out at a later time, I think.
Or I think one has a better revocation strategy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. All these little gotchas.
Okay, so then based on this discussion, it seems, maybe I'll add more details to my namespace proposal and try to push Jordan and Clayton as well, and maybe get into Sigoth and see what they think about this one, and try to push this one more.
Given that, the benefit of this sort of investigation is now you have like a much better idea of, what you want to accomplish. And like I said, maybe, push them for like, how do I extend the existing queue auth scheme to do this rather than I want to do this random thing. What do you think?
Yeah, that I definitely agree that we've learned a bunch from the discussion we've had for user impersonation, and we can use that learning now. Yes. Okay, then I don't have much to add.
Okay, seems we have to go outside the state again.
I did see a lot of comments, or a few comments from you and Madhu as well this morning, which I replied to, and he can take a look at the replies as well.
All right, should we end 13 minutes early? Sure. Is there any business?
Does anyone is blocked on something? Or?
No. Do we have Bill Cop this week? Or are we still waiting till next week to officially kick it off?
Yeah, so we can start build cop rotation. So I'm not sure, is there a tool outside which we can use which auto assigns people and like auto updates and sends an email or something?
We should check with Kubernetes build cop because they at least, I don't know if there is a tool which assigns build cops, but at least they have a tool which aliases build cop to Kubernetes build cop user account, GitHub user account. So something like that will be useful to start with.
Okay.
So who will do that?
Yeah, I can.
You'll do that? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can we just close on maybe formats? Are we fine with this right now? with alternating between sync status and then design review, or looking that we're already in, beginning of May? Do we want to plow through more design reviews?
My suggestion would be we finish or close all the design reviews because a couple of them in pending state, right? Since long.
Yeah, we have 3 more.
So just do another
Yeah.
design review next week.
Yeah, my preference would be that.
I mean, maybe we could have some of the meeting where if there's, important stuff to discuss, but I would definitely be a proponent of more design review too.
Yeah, if there is something important, we can always give more priority to that, right?
Makes sense. So I guess next week do like 10 minutes of business and 25 for design reviews or something?
It depends which ones. So the ones we had, Nikhil, you had a really big one today, but there's a lot of open-ended issues and various, comments come from outside the SIG. A few people in this SIG. Federated jobs was fairly small. The federated pet sets is large enough that I wouldn't want to do another one in a 1-hour block.
Okay.
So if we want to do pet sets, I don't know who else feels like.
These 2 stateful sets.
I think next week we can take the HPA review because that's sort of almost concluded in the design document also. But the stateful sets is something which has some open-ended stuff from the other 6 as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So. And I have one more query to either Jonathan or Maru might be able to tell me. You mentioned that there is some ongoing work. I believe, Jonathan, you are involved in that relating to replica sets controller. I raised one PR today. I don't know if I'm stepping on what you are doing. Can you please just check on that? I'll send you the link. And let me know if I'm not stepping on something, the same similar work that you are doing. I did it because the HPA controller also is sort of similar, which splits the object into different clusters, and I used hooks into the adapter. So if hooks are present, and the sync controller would do what the hooks tell, otherwise do the normal stuff the way it is doing right now.
Okay.
This is something Maru suggested a couple of days back, but I've got sort of stuck into my controller itself, so I couldn't do it until then.
We can discuss in the review. I mean, I think that, what you're doing is kind of like coincident with what Jonathan's doing, and it would be good to maybe coordinate and not duplicate effort.
Exactly. So I just don't want to step on some work that you are doing. So if you have already done something and it collides, then maybe we can talk offline to resolve that.
Okay. Yeah, I will take a look after this.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I'll send the link to the PR also.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. So good.
Cool.
So do we still want to do only HPA, or maybe touch upon stateful sets and do only 20 minutes if there are going to be a lot of open questions, or do only HPA?
I'd say only HPA, just because prep time.
Yeah, I'm fine with only HPA next time. I think we should keep to that.
Okay. So
because I think, as you guys mentioned, stateful sets would need much longer time, I believe.
So you're fine? Is that fine?
Yep. So
Yep.
setting this.
Cool.
Okay. That's it. Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.